All right, so welcome back here today. Today we have our next guest, John Wayne Troxell, who first and foremost is a husband, a father, a grandfather, and somebody we were fortunate enough to connect with just over a year ago. We had sent him a message on social media, and he responded. And we're super fortunate to be able to bring him to you guys here today and talk to him about his life journey. Just over a year ago, we were able to get dinner and talk about beyond the trek and how we wanted to give back in our post-military lives. Since then, he's been an incredible mentor, somebody we've been able to call, a friend. He retired after 37 years in the military as the third SEAC. He's the owner of PME Counseling. He's an author of a book, and he's continuing getting out there providing leadership lessons to companies and still troops that are out there serving today. So, John, I want to say thank you and welcome.
Chad, Mac, thank you so much. And it's great to see you both.
Here we are. Awesome. So, John, if you could kind of just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and then kind of what you're doing now.
Yeah, John Wayne Troxell, grew up in Davenport, Iowa, joined the military when I was 18, served 37 years, 10 months, 29 days, just 1 month shy of 38 years. And I was a reconnaissance soldier and rose up through the ranks and was fortunate enough to retire as the third Senior Enlisted Advisor to the chairman. Since retirement, I left the military. I wanted to take on the corporate world, build my own company. So PME Hard Consulting is my consulting company. And I also have a nonprofit called eTool Nation, which I use to support veteran athletes. And I have been accused of being a serial consultant because I consult for about 6 different businesses right now. I'm a motivational speaker and an ambassador for a lot of organizations, and I'm a published author. But as you stated right up front, first and foremost, I'm a proud husband to my wife, Sandra, 41 years, and proud father to my 3 sons, Daniel, Michael, and Brian, and a proud grandfather to my 4 grandchildren.
That is awesome. They talk about what you would do in the military early in the morning compared to what people do on a normal day, and you just like your entire life, like, oh man, I still got time to go, John.
And oh yeah, absolutely.
So that's beautiful.
So one of the things I wanted to ask you too up front is, so obviously 37 years is a long time to be in the military, and you lived a whole life just in there between going to Panama and then Iraq, Afghanistan, and just seeing things all the way through. And today's conversation, I know we're going to focus a lot on personal resilience, identity, what that transition was like. And I guess one of the things I kind of wanted to ask is, what did you feel like your sense of purpose was when you were coming through the military, and then when you started facing those hardships, when you went to Panama, those lessons learned you learned in Panama, carrying those forward to Iraq and Afghanistan and continued that messaging, and then how have you carried that transitioning from the Army?
Yeah, so when I joined the military, as Forrest Gump would say, I fit in like one of those round pegs. It was the right fit for me. I had no purpose, motivation, or direction when I joined, but automatically. So throughout my career, I was absolutely loving being a soldier. And shortly after I got to my first duty station, I met, my future wife. We got married. And then I had this beautiful woman that was on this journey with me. And so, first and foremost, what kept me going through 37 years was that I loved it. I absolutely loved serving my country and being a soldier. Now, as you were describing, military life isn't all beer and Skittles. I mean, you're going to face adversity. And, we were a peacetime military in the 80s. And, the adversity then, was, are the troops going to get off at 1700 on Friday and get the weekend off, and until I got to the 82nd Airborne Division and I learned what being part of a rapid deployment force was a part of. And here I was in Germany in a heavy mech unit, and I get to the 82nd, and all of a sudden people are talking about going to war and killing the enemy and all this other stuff. And I'm like, damn, where the hell did they get these guys from, It was just something I wasn't accustomed to. But and it really didn't hit me until I got alerted, marshaled, deployed, and did the combat jump into Panama. And within 24 hours of getting that alert, we were in combat, not only in combat, but we had our first casualty in Specialist Alejandro Manrique Lozano. Now think of this, and this is where this, building resiliency comes in. 24 hours before that, yeah, we were on Division Ready Force 1 and everything, and we were expected to deploy but it was half-day schedule in around Christmas. So we all thought, yeah, we'll be on this 1-hour recall, but at noon every day, we'll be home with our families and, and everything. So as an entire force, we thought, hey, and then when we got alerted, we were like, hey, what's going on here, So 24 hours from thinking that we were going to enjoy half-day schedule, we had done the combat jump and we were pushing the lodgement area out and we were engaged in combat. And that's when I saw my first American soldier with glint tape on one arm and American flag on the other that was killed in action. The same young man that was hoping to spend time with his family over those holidays that all of us were going to. And that had a huge impact on me in a positive way, that I was going to continue to do everything necessary to make sure that my troops were ready for the worst day of their life. And second of all, I was going to continue, even post Panama and throughout my career, I was going to do things to build resiliency into the soldiers I was responsible for, and get them to be able to understand that we are going to face adversity and that you're going to have the resilient skills to be able to get beyond this. And so that's how I went throughout my career. Now I will tell you, where my resiliency was tested the most was when I was the SEAC, and I'd been in the job closing in on 3 years. I was just over a year left in the job, and I was getting ready to go on a trip with the chairman to Europe, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I get a call from the director of the Joint Staff, which is a 3-star, says, "Hey, you need to come into the Pentagon. I need to see you." I said, "Hey, I'm getting ready to go to, to Andrews Air Force Base to get on the chairman's aircraft with him to Europe." He goes, "Yeah, I understand that, but you got to come in." And so I came in and I go into his office, and here's this Air Force 3-star, and there's 2 lawyers, 2 1-stars, 1 Navy, 1 Air Force standing on either side of him. And I was like, oh shit, this can't be good. And they brought me in and said, "You've been suspended of your duties as the SEAC pending an investigation." And it was like, what the hell is this? And I said, "Well, why am I being suspended?" They said, "We can't tell you." And the PAO was in there too. It was an Air Force colonel who just retired as an Air Force 2-star as Secretary Austin's public affairs guy, Major General Ryder. And Ryder looks at me and says, "Oh, and we're going to send out a press release tonight to let the force know that you have been suspended." And I thought to myself, I'm suspended pending an investigation. You won't tell me what I'm under investigation for, but you're going to tell the world that I am suspended. And so you can imagine the anxiety there, because generally, what are the 3 things leaders get in trouble for? Inappropriate relationships, misuse of alcohol or drugs or something like that, DUI, or misuse of federal money or something like that, And so, I left that day. They told me, "Hey, go home and then come back on Monday." It was on a Thursday that this happened. So I'm driving home and I'm numb. I don't know how to act, because for my entire career, I've been a leader of action, someone that when there's a problem, I always go and fix it and everything. And now I'm out of the equation. I couldn't do any duties as a SEAC, and I was basically on hold. And throughout that process, you really find out who cares about you and who your friends are. Because people started walking away from me in the Pentagon. They wouldn't talk to me. And, it really was, it was a huge, um, burden on me. And every day I would go in. Eventually, what they did is they put me in some little cubicle in the middle of the Pentagon. Now, I wasn't alone. I had a couple cellmates. I had an Army 3-star and an Air Force 3-star that were my cellmates that were under investigation for the same stuff. Eventually, I was under investigation for creating a hostile and toxic work environment, using torturous language, surrender or die, to the enemy and everything, and stuff like that. And it took 6 months for this investigation to finish. And when it was all said and done, I was reinstated by General Dunford, and I was put back into action. Um, and But that whole process there really tried me. And people were telling me, you should just retire in lieu of this. Don't put up with this BS. And I said, no, if I quit now, then I'm telling every service member out there it's okay to quit. And I wasn't going to quit. And I went in and told Secretary Madison, General Dunford, there's only 2 ways I'm leaving. You're going to reinstate me, or and let me finish out and retire, or you're going to fire me. But I ain't quitting. I don't care if I got to sit down there for 5 years. I ain't quitting. And that was the attitude I took on. So every day, I didn't want to give the assholes that filed the complaint against me any satisfaction either. Every morning I got up, and I lived on Fort Myer, which was right near the Pentagon, but I would get up and go do my runs around the Pentagon. I wanted to be seen doing the things that I was expected to be doing in my service, my Army PT uniform. And every day I would go in there and I would sit in that cubicle and I would do the things I normally did. Get up and go and get a cup of coffee, or, down at the food court, or go to the chairman's mess and grab my lunch and everything. I wanted to show people that I was holding my head high and I was not going to be intimidated or, being made to feel sorry for myself because of what I was in. Now, underneath there, every day I would go home to my wife, and it was just tough. And for her, every day I would come home, she would say, hey, how was your day today? Now think of this. I've been sitting on my ass for 9 hours in a cubicle having a conversation with 2 generals about, what episode of Moonshiners we're watching and everything, because we couldn't do anything else. We couldn't get on email. We couldn't do anything military related. We couldn't do. So it truly was like we were in prison, 3 dudes in prison, and we were talking about inane shit like that. And she knew what I was doing every day, but every day she made it a point to cheer me up by saying, hey, did you have a good day today? How was your day? How was your run? Blah, 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 all this stuff. And that helped me a lot, So I think the bottom line there is that in the face of the worst adversity, the best policy to have is to face it head on with your head held high and be resilient. And because especially if it's adversity where others are looking to do personal or professional harm to you, the more you take it and start feeling sorry for yourself, or start showing that they are having an effect on you, you're losing. All right. And I wasn't going to allow that. And then when I was reinstated and told I could go back to my office, that's when I did the Conor McGregor walk back to my office, So, my arms, I was like, but the lesson I learned, gents, out of all that was don't change who you are as a leader. Continue to be passionate. Continue to be focused on getting people to reach their untapped potential and get into the pinnacle of excellence. But be careful of those around you and be cognizant of who is there on your team, who isn't on your team. And the guy that was part of this group that filed a complaint against me was actually my XO. And he was an Air Force E9 that was all about personal gain. And, because I made him do stuff like PT every day, and that, he had to wear his uniform every day, that all of a sudden Troxell was toxic. So anyways, that was a lot of stuff said for one question, Chad. I apologize, but I'm kind of passionate about this stuff.
Yeah.
That was excellent.
No, it was. Yeah. And like you brought up a really good point. You're saying like, you would make him do PT or things like that. One of the things we always go out and tell people, and we had an opportunity to go talk to some bubbas at the 82nd, and one of the questions I always ask is, hey, describe your ideal teammate. So when I hear somebody like that, I want to go to that person and say, describe your ideal teammate. Typically you get the answer of somebody who's fit, somebody who's disciplined, somebody who's strong. And I go, okay, awesome. Are you that teammate? that you want somebody else to be? Do you hold other people to a higher standard than you hold yourself to? And I guess when you got through that, and you even going back to like Panama, learning those tough lessons and facing all that adversity you faced along the way, when you got reinstated, how did you carry that forward, and how did you like just kind of continue on until you retired, like holding yourself to that standard?
So I had a year left when I got reinstated. I just went out and picked up where I left off. I inspiring the troops, saying things to intimidate the enemy or enemies of our nation, and focus on the positivity of service. I'll tell you, you guys know the world we live in right now, and with this change of administration, I didn't want to talk politics here, and I'm not going to talk politics, but I see online, like Facebook groups and stuff of senior non-commissioned officers that are pissing and moaning about people that have been nominated and confirmed as leaders on this administration. Gents, I never worried about that shit when I was in ranks. I never once worried about who the Secretary of Defense was or who the chairman was. Hell, I didn't even know who the damn chairman was when I was a platoon sergeant in the 82nd because I was too busy building snake eaters that will kill the enemy by any means necessary, And to see this kind of stuff now it leads me to, is this the lack of resilience we have in our senior non-commissioned officers, or is this the permissive environment we have now where people can go online and voice their opinion about people that are in their chain of command and think that it's okay? I just, that in no way, back to the subject here, is how we build resiliency. Don't worry about who's in the Pentagon. Worry about who's down there at Fort Liberty, North Carolina, in your squad, in your platoon, or in your company, or whatever, and worry about making them the best that they can be.
So, excuse me, those conversations I think are extremely important. And when we think about resiliency, and you talked about going through your career, now you're on the opposite side of that. What does resiliency mean to you now in this new chapter, especially when you've been deemed like the consultant of consultants, if you will, of you're consulting so many organizations? So what does that new chapter look like?
So Mac, that to me, what it means is, I have to continue to be committed. So these organizations are paying me to get to a certain objective. And I can't, even though I'm retired, I can't say, well, this is what I'm going to do. They want me to do this, but I'm only going to do this because I won't be on that team very much. And when it comes to some of these organizations that want me to travel a lot, yeah, it takes time away from my family, but the resilience comes from my wife and I having constant family conversations on the direction we are going to build a future for our grandchildren and continue to help our children. My youngest son works for me in my consulting company. And so I think the way the resilience is built post-military is because you're goal-oriented. And where are you going and what direction are you going? And where do you see yourselves? Having a vision of where you want to go and everything. And then having those conversations with the family. And then the other thing there is, even when I'm traveling 270 days out of the year, every quarter my wife and I figure out some way to get away, just ourselves. And we've got this little oasis right here in Ocean Shores, Washington, on the beach. It's a little Airbnb community that's got all of these Airbnb houses right on the ocean. And across the street from the house we always get is a great steakhouse, a mom and pop store, a coffee shop, and a bar. Everything we need right there, right on the beach. And so I think the way you build resilience and the way you continue to maintain it is, like, if I'm traveling, like in October, I'm going to be gone for like 3 straight weeks, and the vast majority of that's overseas. When I come back from that, my wife and I will hit our oasis. So we have something to look forward to. And the more we have these conversations about our vision, our priorities, and where we're going as a family with business and things like that. And then we have planned breaks in there. That builds on the resiliency. And you're like, okay, my husband's going to be gone for 3 straight weeks, but guess what? When he comes back, we're going to be together out in our oasis. And I think that's how you get after it in your post-military life. The problems I see with a lot of veterans post-military is they live this purposeful career in the military. They had a purpose of what they were doing. And then they get out, and especially if they're doing nothing, all of a sudden that purpose is gone. And when you lose that purpose, you lose perspective. And when you lose perspective, pretty soon you can be, like I was talking about earlier, that agitator that, well, the military squared away when I was in. Now, it's, ponytails and all this other shit going on, and the military's gone to crap when they have no idea, what's going on inside the force. And so I think when you leave the military, you got to do something purposeful that will give you that same kind of feeling that you had in formation. Now, I'll tell you, I've been retired. It'll be 5 years on the 31st of March. And I have not missed a moment being in uniform. Okay. Now hear me out. All right. Because I have been engaged from an adjacent angle in terms of leadership development and kind of what you guys are doing too, with your Beyond the Trek stuff. I'm still engaged and I'm still serving a purpose with the men and women in uniform. But I don't want to be in uniform right now. I did my time, and I damn sure don't want the 3 a.m. calls where Joe and his buddies are in the MP station or something like that, or I don't want to have to go in and the boys have been playing beer bottle hockey in the barracks and tore the shit up and everything. All right. But the point being is, I have a new vision. I have a new purpose. I don't look back. I look forward. I keep an eye on what's in the rearview mirror because I can't forget where I came from, but I'm looking out the window, the front window of the car on what's coming ahead. And I think that's the best way to get after it in post-military, to build on your resiliency.
You brought up a real good point too, John. Like you're talking about how you and your wife, connect outside. It made me think of something. We've had those conversations before where you talk about those guys that are they're really good at their job. They hone their craft. They give everything they have to work. But when they go home, their life's a dumpster fire. Because there's a lot of guys that we work with and guys that we know that actually listen to these. And what would you say to those guys that give everything right to the job and they go, don't worry, and their wives are like, hey, I'm here, right? I'm holding down the fort. And they're like, don't worry, when I retire, when I get to that next assignment, it'll be better. We'll pour back into each other. What advice would you give those guys to like that worked for you and your spouse and your family going through all those times where you had to be away and come back? And did you ever fall victim to, I just got to be at work. I got to be there for the guys?
Oh, certainly. I think we all do. And you guys, both of you guys probably have stories you could tell too. But I think where we go wrong at is when we look for work-life balance as someone that's a part of this warrior class. When you're never going to get work-life balance because we're an expeditionary military, you're going to deploy somewhere, to compete, to respond to crisis, or ultimately have to fight and win. I think what you get after is work-life rhythm. And it's a commitment by the service member and the family that we understand that we're not going to be as together as we could be, but when we are together, we're going to maximize our time. And we are going to do things together as a family that will allow me, one, as the service member, to decompress, allow us to continue to get after family goals and stuff like that. And then when I'm at work, I'm going to maximize my time there to be the best that I can be. So I think work-life balance is out. It's work-life rhythm and how we get after that. Now, I'll give you an example. When I was the SEAC, well, first of all, since my wife and I have been married, we've always enjoyed having fun together with each other. And so going out dancing, having adult beverages, and we love karaoke. All right, absolutely love it. To the point we have a $2,000 karaoke machine in our family room here. And so when I was a SEAC and I would be on the road, 9 months out of the year, when I would come back, sometimes on a Friday night, when I get back, my wife and I would go out to dinner or something. We'd come back and we'd have our own personal karaoke party right there in our house, just her and I. And to this day, as retirees, every Friday night, we didn't have it last night because we're going to the fights tonight, but every Friday night we have our own individual karaoke party. And so it doesn't take a lot to get after those kind of things that build family resiliency and everything. It's just a commitment to it. So if you commit to the rhythm as opposed to trying to commit to the balance, which you'll never get, you'll be better at both. You'll continue to be that elite warfighter at work, that very prominent leader, and at home you will be, a great husband or wife or whatever, and your relationships will be harmonious.
Yeah. Oh, I gotta.
That is I mean, it's beautiful. Like, commit to the rhythm.
Yes.
Because the balance is not achievable.
No. You show me somebody that served, that was a phenomenal leader or a phenomenal soldier that has balance figured out, and then I'll say, well, that's a unicorn right there, okay? Because you guys know it, especially in your communities that you guys grew up in. There's no way you can get to that. There's no way. When every year you're doing something, you're going somewhere to do something, whether that's, like I said, compete, respond, or fight, and it has to be that way. That's the other thing, is when you as the family unit understand the big picture. A lot of times where families, spouses really get it wrong is they don't understand the big picture. They don't understand, and I'm not saying, a service member should download the National Defense Strategy, take it home and educate his spouse on it, but I'm saying, okay, did you see that Chinese balloon that came across the country? Okay, that was an impingement on our airspace, all right? Did you see what's going on in Ukraine right now? Did you see what's going on with these Iranian proxies in Israel and places like that? And then if you talk about, that the reason we're an expeditionary military is because of all the bad actors and bad stuff that goes on in the world. And we have a commitment to not only defending our freedom here and abroad, but, have a commitment to our partners and allies. And this is what we do. And this is what we signed up for. And then even have the conversations. If this is something you're not comfortable with to the spouse, then we need to look at doing something else. But this is what it is. Where service members and their families don't have those conversations. When they don't have them, that's when all the bad stuff can go in and happens, And some people say, well, I don't want to expose my wife to any of the bad stuff that we do and everything like that. No, let them know what's going on. When I was a Stryker Brigade Sergeant Major during the surge in Iraq, I had one of my, back then our artillery battalions were doing non-standard missions. They were infantry battalions, basically, because we needed more foot soldiers than we needed firing batteries. And one of my guys was a platoon sergeant, and he was out in the fight every day, but he was telling his wife, oh, I never leave the wire. He didn't want to worry his wife by saying, hey, I'm out in the fight and everything. He said, I never leave the wire. I'm a FOBIT, this and that. Well, we were getting ready to move him from his platoon because his KD time was up, and we were going to move him into a staff position. But a week before that happened, he was hit by an IED and was killed in action. And so now the casualty notification team has to tell his wife he was on a combat patrol and his vehicle was struck by an IED and he was killed in action. And the wife is like, wait, he never left the wire. What are you telling about? What are you talking about and all this stuff? So the service member may think that they're protecting their family by not telling them what they do, but they are creating issues, especially if something bad happens, like happened to that family. Because think of this now, this military spouse who thought that her husband, because he's on the fob every day, he's going to come home here in a few months and everything. He's never coming home now. And if he would have been upfront with her, it would have been easier for her to be able to accept that, because she knew the risks involved with someone out on patrol every day. So that's why I continue to get after open conversation about what you do, and how you get after business, and what the training schedule, deployment schedule looks like in general terms. We'll get after, to your point, Mac, we'll get after that rhythm that is attainable, as opposed to trying to go after the balance that you'll never get to.
And what would you say to that, to somebody who's going to hear that and be like, that's easy for him to say. He was a sergeant major, like, all sergeant majors he stayed in forever. Him and his wife's life must have been great. And obviously it's always easier for us to just deploy, go to training, than it is to come home and deal with your family, like sometimes, and have those conversations. What advice would you give to somebody that's, that tries to think that?
Yeah, I get it, Chad. I was a sergeant major for 20 years, but in 1982, I didn't get meritoriously promoted to sergeant major in basic and AIT. I went through everything, and I joined the Army in September of 82. In September of 83, I got married, and I met my wife on 1 February 83. And so as an E1, I met my wife. And when we got married, big money. Yeah. And we had all kinds of financial issues. And then as a PFC, we ended up going to Germany. Now we're in a foreign country. We've only been married just not even a year yet. And we're in a country that we don't understand the customs courtesies, certainly don't understand the language. And there's no on-base housing, so we have to live off-base. And, I couldn't afford to have a car, so I had to figure out how to get to work every day, whether that was walking, taking a bus, a taxi, or something like that. We've been there. But what my wife and I did, even on the worst of days, to the point when we were stationed in Germany, at one point, I had enough money to buy food for her and my oldest son, who was a baby at the time, and I would steal MREs out of the frickin' supply room to eat, But I never complained, because I was like, hey, I've got to figure this out. I've got to continue to take care of my family, and I got to figure this out. And even back then, we had this communication and this focus on each other and how we're going to get after this. And when I talk about, sharing information, the other thing is, the more the military family is involved, the better off the service member and the family is going to be. And one of the proudest days of my life, when I was a young E4 in Germany, my wife went to a family readiness group meeting, and she came home after that and she goes, I'm the vice president of the family readiness group now. And I was like, we're doing this together. We're in this together. She has committed to being part of taking care of other families, while I can focus on being the best soldier I can be. So we want to throw shade on things like family readiness groups, thinking that they're knitting circles and all they do is piss and moan. That it's a bunch of Gladys Kravitzes pissing and moaning about stuff and everything. But they're important organizations, and then she started playing community softball, and she started doing a lot of things. And that lasted even when I was the SEAC, when she would read to elementary school kids. She volunteered at the thrift shop. She volunteered at the USO. I think the more the service members and families, from as young as they even to the young troops, the more you embrace your service and your family embraces it, the better off you're gonna be, and the better career you're gonna have. Even if you're gonna get out after one tour, okay.
I think that's really great advice, because I had to suffer through a divorce, and I look back at believing kind of that information when I was a young soldier, like, hey, you want to stay away from that, or if I tried to communicate about what I was doing, my wife didn't really want to know. So I thought that was the right thing when it wasn't really building a unit. And I just appreciate you sharing that, John, because there's individuals out there that are in uniform and those are outside of uniform. They're now looking like, how do I build a family unit to get to 41 years of marriage where somebody's rolling with me for the long haul and is, communicating. I think that this key thing is communication. So thank you. Really, thank you.
I'll tell you, Mac, when we hit our worst, for whatever reason, the worst day that we had was when I was in Germany, and it was payday, and there was an alert that morning. This was before the wall came down, and we were still doing border duty on the East German border. And it was on payday, and I got a no pay due. And I was like, and I was on my way to the East German border at the time too, and I'm like, shit, what is my wife? How's she going to be able to, buy groceries and take care of the family and everything? And so we got set up in our position in the East German border, and I found my way to a phone booth, and to give her a call, and she had been on the phone with finance. Now this is a young E3's wife. She's on the phone to finance trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And she's on the phone with, Army Community Service on what we can do to get relief and everything like that. And that was built off of, us being part of this thing together. And I think the more that we do that, there's so many military spouses, and no disrespect, but especially the young troopers, they get this sense of entitlement that thinks that, when their husband or wife deploys, that all of a sudden the battalion headquarters is, the food loft, it's a Jiffy Lube, and it's everything, all they have to do is go to the battalion headquarters and get their tires rotated if they want to. If they want a check cut for $500 so they can go, what we have to do is educate those families. And the more we educate them, the more they will be resilient and the more they will be able to solve their issues themselves. But again, too many times in the military right now, we don't do that. And in the end, it ends up hurting us.
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%. You're talking about, right there, coaching, teaching, and mentoring. What are you doing now in your PME consulting that you've taken those lessons learned of hard combat, no notice deployments, seeing family members, right, after a deployment that have lost a loved one? How have you carried all that forward and pay that and teach leadership lessons learned?
So first, PME hard means physically, mentally, and emotionally hard. And some people think outside of a military context, why do you have to be physically hard? Well, I think it's common sense. The more you take care of your health and your wellness, the more mentally and emotionally fit you're going to be. And the more energy you will have to get after any kind of goals or aspirations you might have. I'll tell you, I belong to a business consortium called the Chairman's Club. And I am probably the lowest paid dude out of everybody that's a member of this thing. There are multimillionaires and billionaires there. Every time we have a conference, a quarterly conference, and we come together, every day there is a fitness session that, it's voluntary, but the vast majority of the people that are there doing that. And when you look at people, the prominent business people like Bezos or Zuckerberg or people like that, what do they focus on the most? Their health and their wellness. And so what I try to do based off of, being physically, mentally, and emotionally hard for combat and everything is, now how do you do that in post-military life that will keep you purposeful? Well, first and foremost, take care of your health, whatever you need to do. You guys saw, the last time I saw you guys, I was 229 pounds and I looked like an AEW pro wrestler more than anything, and although I was working out, and everything, my diet was for shit. And that spilled over to, it was affecting my resiliency. I was angry all the time. I was constantly in pain. And finally, September 17th, I had a major acid reflux incident. And I said, no more. I'm going back to the way I was eating on active duty, and I'm going to get back. And here in 4 months, I went from 229 and weighed myself this morning. I'm 195. And I walk pain-free now, relatively pain-free. No more acid reflux. My resiliency has come back. And because I've made this commitment to myself in my health, I'm a better husband, better father, better grandfather, and better business owner, and a better consultant for the businesses that I'm supporting. So that physical aspect that we get after in combat, which equals to more mental and emotional fitness and everything, I do it now because it makes me better mentally, emotionally, technically, tactically, whatever I'm doing. It's made me better because I chose to take care of myself and my health and my wellness. And like the phrase I use, especially being almost 61 years old, you got to get busy living or get busy dying. And you want to get busy dying? Stop exercising, eat whatever you want, drink every day. Don't worry about relationships with people, be self-serving and force your family to wait on you hand and foot and everything. And that's a good way to go down a hole to get busy dying. But get busy living, you take care of your health, you eat right, you exercise, you get plenty of sleep. It makes you better in all those other areas. So that's why, why I named my company PME Hard Consulting, but it applies, all the stuff we were doing in combat, physically, mentally, emotionally, technically, and tactically, the tactics and techniques might be different, but it applies in post-military life because in the end, you're living a purposeful life that gets you after your goals and aspirations.
Yeah. John, I don't know why you didn't hire me yet. I'm going to leave Chad behind and go work with John. No, that is what I wrote down here was if you fail to take care of you, you fail those who depend on you.
That's right. Yeah.
Like I was
like, think of Mac. Think of both of you guys and all the people that depend on you. And if all of a sudden both of you guys let your own health and wellness go to crap and all of a sudden you weren't there anymore, what would that mean to your family or those that you love? I mean, it was a huge void that can't be fixed. So let's prolong what we can do and let's maximize what we can do. So to your point, the more we take care of ourselves, the more we can take care of others, especially those that truly depend on us.
Yeah, no, I mean 100%. So many people you can ask them, would you die, like law for anybody, right? No, I die for my kids. I die for my family. Well, how about you try to live for them, man? Like stop having,
Yeah.
No, this is great. I appreciate it, John. I know you're super busy. I'd like to ask a final question for me is, what is your way forward now as you're looking into the next year, year and a half, and things you're trying to get after and accomplish in your personal and professional life there, especially as focusing a lot now in post-service, being a grandfather, and I know one of your sons is living out of state too. So how do you look at all that this next coming year?
So want to continue to grow our business and get after what it's all about, which is taking care of service members and veterans. And I want to continue to maximize time with my family. I want to continue to focus on my health. I'm at 195 pounds now. I'll probably go down another 10 pounds to get back to my fighting weight. And, I'm coming out there in May, for the 82nd convention, or excuse me, All-American Week. And my goal is at the tender age of 61 is to run the division run, standing or running alongside the division commander and division CSM. I've already got the green light to do that, but I don't want to embarrass myself by falling out of the damn runs. Well,
Take your PK shirt off.
yeah, yeah. That's why we gave you that trash bag. Put it over your PK shirt and wear that while you're falling out over there. But I'm just going to continue to get after um, taking care of my business, but more importantly, paying it forward to the current men and women in the military, giving back to my fellow veterans, and then continue to make life comfortable for my family. And that's going to be my focus. And all of that is geared around taking care of my personal health. And that's what I'm going to continue to do.
Okay. Mac, you got anything?
Yeah, John, if this is the last, I heard other podcasts, but if this is the last thing you could tell somebody, what would you encourage them?
Dream big, okay, with what you want to do with your life. Set lofty goals, but they have to be attainable, okay? I remember when I was a JV football player in high school, I think I was the third or fourth string fullback, and I wanted to be an NFL player. Well, that wasn't going to happen, all right? So I had a lofty goal, but it wasn't attainable because I lacked the talent, the size, and everything to do that. Then you got to visualize yourself every day of getting after your goals and your aspirations and everything. Visualize the necessary steps to get there. And then after that, the hardest part for anybody to have a positive impact on their life, their career, is they don't actualize it. They don't go out and execute. They're afraid of failure, or they're afraid of, like you guys already talked about, some of your teammates, what the hell are you doing? They're afraid of criticism and stuff like that. Leave all that stuff out there and get out and get after it. And that's what I would recommend to people out there. Because I will tell you, in the end, especially post-military, nobody gives a shit how successful you are after that, and you've got to really have that drive, that focus yourself to go out and be successful in what you want to do in post-military life, which is why I'm so impressed with the journey you guys at Beyond the Trek have been on, because you're doing this, you faced criticism, you faced roadblocks, but you're not letting that get in the way of your progress, and you're getting after it. So I applaud you guys.
Thank you, John.
Well, thank you, John. We appreciate your time. And then I'm excited to see this thing go live.
Absolutely. Thanks, brothers.
All right.